Welcome back to the homestead and the garden in June. So at the time of this filming and feeling, we are right at the beginning of June. Now, typically, my garden is much further along, but if you caught any of our past gardening by month episodes, you will know that last month, May, was the coldest May on record here where I live in the last 50 years. So everything is quite a bit behind, though we have almost everything in the ground now. So we just got all of the warm weather crops in the ground and our tunnels constructed. However, I got a little bit nervous because it was the first part of June when we finally had temperatures that were hitting 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, ideally, when you're planting your warm weather crops like beans and cucumbers, anything that's affected by frost, you really need your soil temps to be at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit, if not 65 degrees, for the seeds to germinate. So when your air temperature is only in the 60s, your soil temperature is usually still in the 50s. It's about 5 to 10 degrees cooler, the soil temperature, than what the outside air temp is. However, we were already a month behind almost on when we would typically be able to plant those things. So I did get some starts. I normally don't ever buy starts of summer squash and cucumbers or winter squash, but this weather has been so cold, I got a little bit nervous. So we did do some starts. And then over here we direct sowed, and these cucumbers we direct sowed just a week ago, and they're all ready. I've got quite a few that are popping up and then some that are just beginning to break the soil. So these should all be germinated and popped up and growing within the next few days. So it'll be a fun experiment to see, is there that much difference between ones that we've got seed started or transplanted in live plants versus direct sowing when it actually comes to harvest time and overall harvest yields for the whole summer. So this is an experiment that we haven't done before because, like I said, typically I don't buy starts for almost anything. Everything is direct sown with the exception of peppers and tomatoes, which have such a short growing season, I always have to seed start those indoors. So we're going to be testing it out with the rest of them though to see if there's any gains by using the live plants and getting them in, or if everything ends up producing at about the same rate. So I feel like my entire garden this year is a bigger test and experiment than any other year with all the different things we have going on. So we've got the cucumber tunnels here. I started growing our cucumbers on a trellis system like this 2 years ago and love it. I've had less pest issues and less disease. We are typically so wet here that we get a lot of powdery and downy mildew, which are fungal diseases. And by growing the cucumbers on the trellis so that they're up and have more airflow and they're not on the ground, I have not had any fungal disease on any of the cucumbers since we started doing this. So we've gotten a lot larger yield and less disease, which is always an exciting thing. So I've got both of these are cucumber tunnels because we like a lot of pickles. So that's what these are. So in this section, we direct sowed and planted our beans. So both of these tunnels, both sides are our Tar Heel green pole bean. That's the heirloom bean seed my family's been saving for hundreds of years and multiple generations. What's really fun is to see these are already grown quite a bit. They germinated and sprouted extremely fast. And I really believe that is a testament to seed saving because these seeds are accustomed to the cooler temps that we have here, usually at planting time, and they germinated much faster than any of the other seeds that we planted, even though soil temps are the same for all of them. And beans are a warm weather plant, so they like those warmer soil temps. So that's what we have here. Now, all of these tunnels that I have here, I should say, are the Tar Heel pole green beans. I've got other tunnels for our other beans, and even though with seed saving, beans are a self-pollinating plant, I have found that if they are too close together, different varieties, that they will begin to cross a little bit. So by making sure that we have got as large separation as possible, which is probably about at least 20 feet. I'm trying to remember how we expanded the garden. So how many feet across is this now? I'm going to say at least 20 to 30 feet apart from varieties. Then that seems to be enough distance that we don't have crossing and we're able to keep the genetic strains pure with the seed saving of the beans. So this doesn't look like a whole lot except rows of dirt at the moment, but all of this is actually planted direct sowed with more Brussels sprouts and our winter squash. Come back for July because you will see a vast difference in just 4 weeks' time. This will be all filled in, but it doesn't look like a whole lot now. However, my cool weather crops have finally gotten out of hibernation phase and are really starting to put on some growth. So we've got celery here. The celery is doing great. In fact, I'll be able to start harvesting off of this really soon. I've got tons of carrots. So these carrots I just allowed to reseed themselves. I had seed saved some carrots here, and apparently I missed a couple of blossoms. That is your carrot seed. And they just reseeded themselves so well that I left them in the ground because most of this cauliflower and cabbage will have formed heads within about 4 weeks from now. So I'll be pulling them and then there'll be plenty of room. I need to thin out a little bit more actually of these carrots. I did thin them once for the carrots to continue their root formation and be ready to go. And we are actually ready to begin harvesting some things, which is very exciting because normally I can harvest my cool weather crops much, much earlier, but I have got broccoli. So these aren't very large heads. Normally we get nice, large, tight heads. I think part of it's been the weather. We were so cold for so long that they were just in hibernation mode. And then all of a sudden it was like you flipped a switch and we began to warm up. So it's not producing huge heads. I'm not really worried about it. I'm gonna come through and harvest all of these, but you can also see that they are going to be producing little side shoots. So this is more like a broccolini than it is broccoli, and I'll just be getting multiple smaller shoots, but this whole row is broccoli. So we'll be able to get enough of a harvest that it will make it worth its while. But I'm really excited because we finally can harvest something and it feels so late for the first harvest of anything out of the garden. And the cabbage is coming along nicely. I'm getting some small heads are beginning to form. So it's so encouraging because I feel like everything was just sitting here for months and it was like, oh no, are we gonna get anything out of the garden this year? So I guess I was getting in exercise and patience. The Lord figured I hadn't developed enough patience yet, and so he decided to give me a few lessons on learning to wait and do trusting. So we've now got the cabbage. It'll probably be, I'm gonna guess, about 3 or 4 more weeks though before these are large enough to make any curtido out of, which is the main reason that I grow cabbage is to make curtido, which is a Spanish sauerkraut. It is phenomenal. And my new preserving book, which is Everything Worth Preserving, we finally have a title, will be available for pre-order next month, so I'll have information on that. But many of you have asked for my curtido recipe, which previously has only been available in my fermenting course inside the Pioneering Today Academy. But it is going to be one of many recipes that is in Everything Worth Preserving. Now here, this has become kind of my workstation. This was the cold frame that we built out of these straw bales, but now we're warm enough that I don't need to have any type of cover on here. And I had spinach in here, and you can see all of this spinach has bolted. So all of this spinach needs to come out. I'll be giving that to the cows and the chickens. Apparently I left one of my seed packets out here. But I do have some basil in here. So I will be pulling these out and then putting some warm weather plants. I'm going to be using, I think I'm gonna put some peppers in here because this is well draining and peppers don't really like soggy soil. So I'm gonna put some peppers in with the basil this coming weekend and get all of the spinach pulled out because it is definitely went past the point of harvesting. So in May, you saw that I still had my cabbage underneath the cold frame just because we were so cold. And it is now free and in the wild. However, I transitioned my cold frame from the cabbage and popped it over here for the pepper plants. I actually ran out of room in the high tunnel with the tomatoes for the pepper plants. And because we're still a little bit on the cool side, even for us, I got inside here, I've got the majority of my pepper plants. So we've got some jalapenos, King of the North, and then I did seed start quite a few of my peppers. This is not one of my seed starts. This I ended up getting from a nursery. It was through Azure Standard, actually. They have live plants in the spring. That is one of the peppers that I seed started, along with a few little itty bitty tiny ones out here. Many of you, same as me, have noticed that your seed starts, if you bought bagged soil, even though I have seed started successfully for over a decade and never ever had any issues, the potting soil this year has been atrocious. Even the organic, even brands that I have purchased in the past and never had issues, and many of you have noticed that too. I did a complete podcast episode on that and blog post, so if you want to dive into the nitty gritty of that, you can go and check that out. We'll put a link beneath this video for more on that. But I did go ahead and put them in the ground just to see if they'll grow and come out of it. I really don't think that I'm going to get much of a harvest because they are so tiny and stunted. So I did use the cold frame for the larger pepper starts that I was able to get from the nursery, just to ensure that I get some type of pepper harvest this year. So here I have got finally all of the tomato plants in the high tunnel. We still have some of the lettuce, which I've been harvesting and will have to get out of here pulled pretty soon. But I did, again, I feel like my entire garden this year, I did have to buy some starts due to the potting soil fiasco. So these were starts. I actually got some of these from our local grocery store. It was the first time in 15 years of growing my own tomatoes that I've actually seen somewhere else have tomato starts of San Marzano Lungo, which is an heirloom paste tomato. It's one of my favorite tomatoes for sauce. And so the Lord was looking out for me. It's the first time I've ever found that, and it was at our local grocery store. So I was super excited. I grabbed all the ones that they had to get them in the ground. And you can see the difference. So these were the ones that I got from outside nursery sources. And then to help kind of transition this, because this lettuce will all be harvested within the next few weeks. So I planted my starts, which are extremely tiny and stunted. Normally they're this size, because I started these the first part of March, but because of the potting soil issues, they're very small. But it actually worked well for me to be able to get them planted while I still have some lettuce in the garden. So this lettuce will get pulled by the time that these start to grow up and really vine out, and there'll be plenty of room. Some of mine did, like some of the starts, you can see here, I did have a few that are a little bit bigger. It's still on the small side for a tomato plant that's 12 weeks old. I mean, it should be much bigger. But what's encouraging, because I didn't know if these were going to do anything at all, once they got into good soil, our soil here in the ground, they have been out here for 1.5 weeks is when we actually got these potted or put outside. They have put on a substantial amount of new growth. They just needed to get into some soil that had some nutrients and correct micro and macronutrient levels. So I'm really encouraged. I don't know, because they are so small. Again, will my harvest be cut short? Will I actually get harvest from them? Or will they just catch up because they've got perfect temperatures right now? It's warm enough in here and all the nutrients that they need. We'll find out, so stay tuned. So here I have got our potatoes that we were put in. These were put in about 4 weeks ago. In fact, you can see that they're getting large enough now, some of these, that I'll be getting ready to hill some of these up probably next week. So with potatoes, if they are indeterminate, then you want to use hilling practices where you're bringing the soil up about here. You don't want to cover the entire thing up or it'll die, but I'll be bringing the soil when there's there's several, we got 1, 2, 3, probably about 4 levels here of leaves on this one. And so I'll bury this until it's this height on this one. These ones aren't quite tall enough yet, so I'm gonna let them grow a little bit more before I do that, but it's called hilling, and that's why these are in a trench, because then I can easily pull this dirt over them, and then it'll just become the same level as the rest of the garden, rather than try to do it at ground level and then continually mound and mound and mound. We have so much rain here that just ends up washing the soil away, whereas if I have it in this trench, then it works better. But the reason that you want to do that with indeterminate varieties is because everything that is then covered with dirt, that will begin to produce more potatoes. So you get a much larger potato harvest per plant if you actually use the mounding and or hilling method with them. I have a full blog post if you are interested in all the nitty-gritties of growing potatoes and varieties for long-term storage, etc. We will link to that beneath the video so that you can grab those. So this is actually the first planting of our potatoes, and that means these will be ready probably about the end of August. but that's still a little bit warm for me to leave them in the ground, even covered with mulch when it comes to August. So I like to leave potatoes. There's a YouTube video on this one, so we'll make sure we link to that one for you. I leave potatoes in the ground all winter long. I don't harvest them. I use the ground as a natural root cellar, but the timing is really key when you do that. You want them to be just at the end when they'd be ready to harvest, right when your first frost hits. So that means I do succession planting. So this will be like our fresh eating or preserving harvest. And then I saved these beds here because this is where I will plant a second planting of potatoes the end of June, first part of July. And that means they will come right to the end of their life cycle and be ready to harvest once we start to get our cool weather and overnight killing frosts. And then I can leave these beds in the ground throughout the entire winter until the following March or April, depending on how warm we get in March and April. This year I actually could have left them in until May. We were so cold. But that's why you actually will see strategically some of our beds are still fallow because I plan on using them for succession crops and also our fall planting, which is really hilarious at this time of year because some of my fall planting needs to be done the first part of July. So it means I'm actually only planting like 3 weeks apart. If you're in an extreme northern climate that's really short growing season, you'll understand that. But most years I'm not planting my main vegetable garden and then my fall vegetable garden with only 3 weeks between them.